Vice Chairwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderman French.
Present.
Alderman Arnowitz.
Here.
Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Tice. Chairman Rede.
Present.
Board present. You have a quorum.
Okay, we're going to take up the board bills, but before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about, we've been talking about doing a study of the use of financial incentives throughout the city, and I've been kind of making it my personal crusade, and I've had an opportunity over the last several months to meet with people from the budgeting department here, SLDC. We've had meetings with the financial people over at the school system, the comptroller's office, and I've kind of completed my analysis, and one of the things that we're really lacking is a strategic economic development plan for the city. And tomorrow, SLDC will be voting to approve the funding of a strategic plan. So, and it's probably perfect timing. For those of you who aren't familiar with how a strategic plan works or what it might look like for a region, the St. Louis Partnership began their effort about a year ago, and they published theirs out on their website. And it's the St. Louis Economic Partnership. I think if you Google that and nose around out there, you can find it, but it's about a 15 or 20 page document. It's kind of in a PowerPoint presentation. So that might give us a look. SLDC will be going ahead and beginning this process or seeking to get approval for it, and I think it's just natural for us to have some input into that process. So I was going to share some of my findings with Otis in the next week or two, and then I was talking amongst some of the committee members. I hate to go ahead and just kind of tack that on for 15 minutes at the end of one of our meetings, but I thought it might make some sense to have somebody from the St. Louis Economic Partnership come down here, talk about their business plans so we could see how that might work. And then I'll share some of my findings. So I was thinking about having a special meeting for that. We wouldn't need a quorum, but for anybody who'd be interested on the board to learn about, how that works and what we're trying to do with it, that would be available. The other thing is I was just sharing with several of the folks up here. We have used fairly extensively throughout my ward special taxing districts and community improvement districts. Warshoe Redevelopment's been very supportive of that effort, and Bryant Phillips, who's head of that organization, has made somewhat of a study of how these things are used throughout other parts of the country, and I'd like to go ahead and make him available as a resource to some of the other folks, some of the aldermen throughout the city. Brian has been kind of my point man on all the ones that we've created in the last couple years, and has visited probably a dozen different cities throughout the country looking at how they're being used. One of our priorities is, I've heard loud and clear from our members, is how do we go ahead and get some of the activity that's going on in the Central Corridor to other parts of the city. And I think an important component of that would be the use of special taxing districts, TIF districts, community improvement districts. And since the block grant has gutted our ability to have our CUBDOs funded, our strategy is going to be a little different, and we're working out the details, but Fred Wessels at CDA is heading this effort up. And our goal is to fund kind of a hit squad or team of people to go into different commercial districts, and we would hope to do 1 or 2 of these a year. We would create assemble a team of somebody to do outreach to help us build consensus among all the stakeholders. We would have, which is probably the most challenging piece of it, we obviously need some legal support, financial, and then urban planning. And the idea would be is that we would go into each of these various commercial districts and engage the stakeholders and help them develop a shared vision of what it might look like from the standpoint of urban planning, but then how we would pay for it by having financial people, and then how do we go ahead and tie that all together legally. So that is something that I know many of the aldermen are going to be challenged with trying to do that on our own without staff and without CUBDOs to work with. So that's a resource that we're hoping to become available here in the next calendar year. So with that as a kind of a preamble, we put on that we're going to discuss the incentive thing almost every agenda so that we can talk about it. Our attorney down here, David, says that we need to do that. So we've talked about it today, and if anybody came here specifically to hear that, that's what it is. But we will probably have a special meeting focused just on that. We'll spend an hour or two talking about that and try to give everyone an opportunity to get up to speed on it and express some of their opinions about what our, our shared vision might be for a strategic plan. So with that as a bit of background, why don't we go ahead and get into the business of the day. The first board bill we'll take up, and we'll do this by seniority, except for the folks who are on the committee who will stick around and hold ours last, is Alderwoman Young, who is our most senior person down here. I still have to respect. Wobbles up. Alderwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Board Bill 158 relates to 1011 Olive Street. It's the former Boussong's Wine and Liquor, which was on Olive for a long, long time. And it is a two-story building that's being redeveloped by David Bailey of Bailey's Restaurant fame. Dave, you want another one? David acquired it, and he is planning to turn it into a barbecue restaurant. He's investing $1.2 million in the project, and he's using both state and federal tax credits, and there is no parking there, but they will have 90 full-time and 55 part-time people involved in this project. And he's asking for 10 years of tax abatement.
Any questions of the committee? Alderwoman Davis.
Could you just give us a breakdown of the project cost, please?
Acquisition is $250,000, and the construction cost $1.2 million.
Can't seem to find my sheet. Oh, here we go. Alderman French. And Alderman Ornowitz. I have 90 employees full-time?
I think that's on the
during the construction phase? Or?
construction phase. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
90 full-time.
No, we would hope restaurants would have 90 employees, because that would mean they were jumping.
All right. I'll entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 158 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Need a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass our Board Bill 158.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy, Vice Chairwoman Davis.
Yes.
Alderman French. Aye. Alderman Arnowitz. Aye. Alderman Carter, Alderman Tyus, Chairman Rode.
Aye.
4 yes votes, 0 no vote. Board Bill 158 comes out with a due pass recommendation.
The old alderman will now leave.
Okay, next up is, I believe Alderman Vollmer is next in seniority. Board Bill number 163. Oh, I'm
Morning,
sorry.
Mr.
We had somebody signed up to speak. Are you,
It's okay. He's a customer of mine. He's all right. He can go.
okay.
Okay. If anybody else
I
has questions, I'm the
apologize.
development consultant, so if you're good,
okay.
we're good.
All right.
All right?
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thanks for having me this early hour of the morning. Board Bill 163 is a simple zoning matter. We have a parcel of property, 5213 Bischoff, which is going to be torn down and turned into a new project. We have a gentleman who owns this parcel and the parcel next door, which is a commercial property. He's looking to keep 12 foot by 41 feet of this parcel and attach it to his zoned F commercial property for a driveway. which, if you are familiar with the Hill neighborhood, parking is rather scarce. So he needs it for his business, which he runs out of there, which will keep the complaints down that he usually parks in his driveway to his garage. So it's a matter of neighborhood concern. He's being a good neighbor. He's doing this, and we all look forward to helping Mr. Suter with this problem. Are there any questions?
Alderwoman Davis?
No, thank you.
Alderman French? No question. Alderman Ornowitz? Alderman, just so I understand, they got a little map here, so he has there's a whole parcel, and he's just carving off a small piece of it?
He's keeping a 12-foot wide by 41-foot deep so he can park his vehicles next to his business. The property to the east is going to be, there's 2 homes there he's going to be tearing down and developing into a new home. We're talking about tearing 2 homes that were built in 1908, 1910, little shotguns. They'll be turned into probably a $200,000 or $300,000 home eventually in the future. But with the scarce parking, if you're familiar with that area, that's Bischoff and Marconi. He owns a building which his waterproofing business is in. There's a beauty shop. Steve's Hot Dogs is in the same buildings. And across the street is Vitale Bakery. Caddy Corner is the Bocce Club, and then you have the gas station. So there is no parking, which is true of most all the business area in the Hill.
Okay. There is a speaker, Tom.
Mr. Suter is the owner of the property here to answer any questions if necessary. And if you don't feel the need to ask him, he'll be happy to sit.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 163 with a do pass recommendation. Moved by Alderman French. Second. Previous row. Hearing no objection, we'll consider Board Bill number 163 as read and passed out of committee.
Thank you for your efficiency.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderwoman Ingrassia, Board Bill number 162.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have before you Board Bill 162, which is a rezoning of some parcels in the 2800 block of Magnolia in Fox Park. This is for an affordable housing project that DeSales Housing Corporation is undertaking. And so with this rezoning, it will allow 3 separate parcels to have 2 family units on them. It's supported by the neighborhood. It's going to be instrumental in a renaissance of not just this block, but the immediate area. I'm happy to take questions, and Tom Pickle with DeSales is here as well.
Tom, did you care to say anything? Or?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just that it's a project that we've been working hard on. We're very excited about. I brought some site plans with a street elevation of this particular location. These 3 buildings will be part of a 36-unit, $7.1 million low-income housing tax credit development that we're doing in the southern end of Fox Park here. For the first time for us, it's going to be substantially new construction. Half the units will be new construction. Those new units will be in buildings very similar to what you see on this plan. We've developed this design with our architect in consultation with the Cultural Resources Office. The Preservation Board has approved the design already. We're hoping to close on this project in the next couple of weeks and get started very shortly after this. But we're very proud that I think this is really going to nicely infill an open site there on the 2800 block of Magnolia, and as Alderwoman Ingrassia said, really be a stimulant for more development in that part of Fox Park.
So these are zoned 1 family today, and is that what?
I think
you're going to zone them, rezone them?
maybe Mary Hart Burton can speak to that.
The issue is that one parcel is Zone C and another parcel is Zone B, and when they combine them, it would create dual zoning, and that would require us to go by the more restrictive zoning, which is the B zoning, and it wouldn't have allowed for the density. So that's why we're having them do a rezoning so they can consolidate and re-subdivide.
So these are going to be two family flats?
Okay. Yes.
And what was there just 2 lots before?
Yes, there are 2 lots existing. We're going
Taking
to,
2 lots and you're
Converting them
rezoning it
to
to 3.
three.
And then you're taking it, okay, I understand.
so we need consistent zoning across the parcels.
Okay. So you're going to, that'll give you 6 units, and that was with the low-income housing
Tax credit, right.
And what was the value of the tax credit?
The value of the tax credit?
How much tax credit? What, I thought you, I'm sorry, I was half listening when you said
Okay.
earlier. You gave the value, the cost of the project was?
Total development cost is about $7.1 million.
For 6 units, so?
Well, no, as I said, these 6 units are part of a 36-unit project.
Oh, okay.
So it's a largely scattered site, but concentrated for the most part here in the southern end of Fox Park.
Okay,
There are
so
three
it's 30.
three other units on a similar site over in the 9th Ward on the 2800 block of Ohio, just a couple blocks
Okay,
from
so
this site.
your project costs are going to be about $200,000 a year
Yes,
or so?
yeah.
Okay. I was going to say $7 million for 6 units.
Those would be nice.
Yeah. Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions?
No question.
Yeah.
Alderman French?
No question.
Alderman Ornowitz? Hearing no other questions, I'll entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 162 with the due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Previous.
Been moved second, request for previous roll. Hearing no objections, we'll consider that board bill as heard and passed out of committee. Next is Board Bill.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Alderwoman. Board Bill number 176, our newest Alderwoman, Alderwoman Young, Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Board Bill 176 pertains to the TIF for the Southtown project at Kings Highway and Chippewa, and I have a couple of witnesses here with me to talk through some of the points of this today. Michelle Stuckley from the City of St. Louis Industrial Development Authority, Gina Martin from Stiefel, Lori Bachman of Armstrong Teasdale, and Charles Salisbury, Bill Keeling, and Rob Drowney from Pocinelli. In 2003, the city approved a $7.6 million TIF for the Southtown project. And because of the high interest rates associated with these notes, then in 2006, when the interest rates had dropped, we refinanced the deal, making sure that that the interest that was accruing and compounding wasn't causing the initial balance to grow higher than the original $7.6 million. We're now at a place where interest rates have dropped again, and we're looking to refinance the project once again to make sure that the debt isn't growing higher than that original $7.6 million. And right now we're estimating that the new average cost of the debt would go down to 4.6% from 6.9% where it is currently, and that would allow for the full repayment of the TIF bonds and notes, and also allow for the city to receive approximately $775,000 after the bonds and notes are paid off. If this refunding does not occur, the city will receive no cash, and there will not be full repayment of the TIF bonds and the notes. I think I'll invite Bill Keeling up now to help with any other questions.
Thank you, Alderman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think the Alderwoman has given a very good summary of the situation. This bill does not grant any new benefit. It doesn't extend the TIF, and in fact, it shortens it a bit to allow the city to actually receive some cash out at the end. So we're happy to answer any questions, and we have the various other professionals here if there's any detailed questions.
So we're cutting the interest rate, and will that accelerate the amortization rate? Is it currently amortizing at all?
The bonds are, the notes are not. So you can think of it in terms of a first mortgage and a second mortgage.
Okay.
First mortgage is being covered, second mortgage is not totally being covered. And right now, the projections are that the notes would not be fully retired by the end of the TIF term.
Who holds the notes and the bonds?
The bonds are on the general market, and would be refunded. We have Gina Martin here from Stiefel, who might answer that. The notes are held by the original developer, DDR Corporation.
And so, how much was the notes and how much were the bonds?
In 2006, the bonds were $6.4 million, and the notes $2.3 million.
And how much is outstanding right now?
Outstanding right now is, I'll ask Gina Martin to come up to address that, just to be sure that we're got the accurate answer for you.
The bonds after November 1st are outstanding in the amount of $2,405,000, and the current notes outstanding are $4.1 million.
So the notes are negatively amortizing? Is that what's happening?
The interest is compounding.
Interest continues to compound, and that's one of the issues that exists with this, since the notes aren't being fully covered. What this will do is allow bonds to take out all of the bonds and the notes.
Why would the city agree to do negatively amortizing notes?
That's what was agreed to in the redevelopment agreement that was originally entered into in 2003.
Okay.
I was sitting on the TIF commission.
So we need to review that policy because that's just crazy. Okay. Are there any other questions? Alderwoman Davis?
Just a brief comment. I remember this. I was sitting on the TIF commission, and I was not a happy camper with this at that time. But I know we do better now, and I would hope this would be one of the things that we have a chance to talk more about and put more stronger policies, even for the future. Thank you.
Alderman French? Alderman Ornowitz?
Bill, by doing it this way, it will actually shorten the payout.
A bit, and it will.
We'll be receiving monies back quicker.
Yes, it'll make the thing work. Basically, the financing will then work with the revenues that are available and with what the new debt service would be for the bonds.
Thank you.
And I do have a summary. I'm sorry I omitted to hand that out to the committee. It'll give you some of the facts that to the questions you're asking, so you can have that.
You're welcome.
See, when you have amortizing secondary, negative amortizing secondary notes at high interest rates, that's like putting an equity kicker on the end of these things so that if the project ends up taking off, what ends up happening is they extend the, instead of these bonds paying off at 15 years, they'll get all the upside, you know, for the last, 7 or 8 years or whatever. Okay. And so what we're going to do is lower the interest rates on the bonds, which will free up cash flow to pay off the notes, which will then...
Well, the notes and the bonds will all be combined. Basically, everything will be paid off by this, and you'll just have a bond issue remaining then.
Okay.
That'll have the lower interest rate.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion on this.
Yes. 176. Second.
Request for previous roll, no objection. We'll consider that as heard and pass out of committee.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. That takes care of everybody who's not on the committee. Alderwoman Davis. Yes, well, go ahead. Yeah, 172, Alderwoman.
Okay.
Go back to numeric order.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Board Bill number 172 is a Grand Center redevelopment project. We are in the process of bringing on a new project into that TIF, that area-wide TIF. It proposes the opportunity for a parcel that was not paying any taxes before to a for-profit project that will be paying taxes to the city. What I'd like to do is share with you very quickly that as we have moved forward with this area-wide TIF, we have experienced quite a growth process in the taxes that have come to the city. This TIF Act is just a simple process. As you know, I've come before you many times as I've brought projects on, and this is just another one of those opportunities here. I'd like to turn it over to Ken from the Grand Center as a representative to give you some further details very briefly, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is the project is a project that's already been previously approved in the Grand Center District TIF. And what we're doing is we're taking the Grandel Theatre, which has been a not-for-profit operation for years, and turning it into a for-profit venue. It's about Grand Center is the current owner of the property. We'll sell it to private investors who will pay, who will purchase the building with equity. They're going to do some renovations necessary for occupancy of it. It's about a $4.5 million project. The current, with the rent that they can garner on the property, turning it into a for-profit business, the return is really de minimis. But with the TIF and the rent, the return is going to be about, in the neighborhood of 3 or 4% to them. But more importantly, what it really does is it takes a property that's long been underperforming in the Grand Center District and turns it into hopefully a much more robust and tax-paying project. So it's what we're really doing today is asking for approval for the city to enter into a supplemental indenture to the existing TIF indenture, and which allows this project to then have the TIF notes issued once the sale and improvements are completed.
So how much are the TIF notes going to be for then?
The total amount of TIF notes is $2.3 million is approved for the project, $2.3 million.
And they're being supported by real estate taxes or by?
Be both 100% of the pilots, 50% of the EATs that are produced. And since the district has refinanced, so we have the district-wide refinancing paying off the bonds, now any new projects that we do, whether they were previously approved or not, become sort of standalone. So it will be limited to whatever pilots and EATs are created just off of that project and off of that property. And so it'll be 100% of the pilots, 50% of the EATs.
And the value of that is going to inure to Grand Center or to the developer?
The value will inure to the developer. So what will happen is the developer is buying property from Grand Center. Grand Center will be able to get rid of the debt that it has on the property there. And then the development entity, of which Grand Center will participate, will collect rents. And the rents it can collect really just basically barely cover the operations, but it'll take some sort of participation in the business there to maybe create some upside. So what the TIF notes really do is give them a small return on their investment, and hopefully if the business takes off, then it all makes sense.
So right now, the Grandel Theatre is owned by Grand Center?
It's owned by Grand Center Incorporated, that's correct.
Okay, and it is being leased to a non-for-profit?
It is currently vacant.
Okay.
And it had previously, though, been leased only to non-for-profit. So it has never created income, sales tax off of ticket sales, nor paid property tax.
So Grand Center doesn't pay property taxes at this point?
No.
Okay.
No. So what will happen is that then the property taxes will serve to be, a basis for some return to the investors who buy the property, and then the business operating.
What will Grand Center sell the theater for then?
Appraised value of $2.25 million.
Okay, so you're selling it for roughly what the TIF notes were for?
Yeah, roughly for the TIF notes, that's right. That's correct.
And then they're going to invest how much into the theater then?
And then they're going to put somewhere between 500 and 750,000 in to make it work. There's some issues with the building itself that need to be done to make it really occupiable within. The users will need some tenant improvements as well to service the use. And that number's being, massaged right now to figure out exactly what it's going to be, but somewhere in that range.
Forgive me, I lose track of all the stuff that's going on over there. Where does that fit into the continuum of venues that you have? I mean, is that competing with existing venues, or I guess the Fox is your large venue?
Yeah, the Fox is the large venue. This is actually going to be a new venue type for Grand Center because it will be music, comedy, and gospel are sort of the three big uses that will go in there, so nothing like it exists in the Grand Center district. It's about a 400 to 700 seat, occupancy building. So, I guess maybe the best thing I could compare it to might be like a smaller scale pageant type operation. So nothing like that. And what's really exciting about it for the Grand Center district is it will attract a brand new audience other than the symphony and the Broadway audience, which are the primary audiences there. There are some other music, of course, in the Sheldon and, visual arts and other things, but this will really be the first, sort of commercial, music and entertainment club.
You guys just opened up the Sun then recently? Is that
the Sun is owned by, the Sun is opened, but it really goes with the Grand Center Arts Academy. It's their performing and teaching space for the performing arts portion of their program.
So that's not a really public venue then?
No, not at all.
Okay, and then Sheldon is, I've always thought of it as like a chamber music or...
Yeah, Sheldon's Sheldon's a great entertainment space, but it's a little smaller and it's, a little more serious. It's always billed as the most acoustically perfect room in the community, and so yeah, it's a little. You don't see rock shows in the Sheldon, and you might see that in the Grandel.
Thank you. Alderman French, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Ornowitz, any questions? No questions. The chair will entertain a motion that will pass out Board Bill 172. Moved. Alderman Ornowitz, can you second that? It's been moved and seconded. Previous roll, the request for previous roll. Hearing no objection, we'll consider Board Bill 172 passed out of committee with the due pass recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, I want to just give you a little bit of information that Alderwoman Davis referred to earlier, but just kind of a report card on the Grand Center TIF, if you will. So the Grand Center TIF is an area-wide TIF of 600-something parcels of two sub-areas. One's the St. Louis University piece. If you set that aside, you look at prior to the TIF, the district was creating $490,000 in property tax. In 2013, that was almost $1.8 million. So that's pretty significant growth. On the east side, prior to the TIF, it was about $2.3 million in eats. Now that number is almost $3.6 million. And over the course of the TIF, since it's been approved, it has created almost $4 million of new revenue to the city, after the developer's portion has been shared. So just, I think that's a pretty, plus it's garnered, over $200 million of new development in the Grand Center district. So that's, it's kind of, as you're considering sort of the larger picture, I think that's some information might be important to you.
Actually, I'm in favor of TIF districts as opposed to, I would like us to get weaned off of project-based TIFs and move more towards TIF districts. The $4 million, was that for the city or for the city and the school system?
The $4 million was just for the city. That's the portion of it that's the eats. Okay. So that was the new sales taxes, the new restaurant gross receipts taxes, the new W-10 and P-10 taxes that were collected. That's the share of it that the city kept. Correct.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later. Take care.
Thank you.
Alderwoman, your next board bill is 183.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Board Bill 183. The project is a redevelopment project in the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood. It's at 1349 North Garrison. You've heard me talk about Tilly's Corner in the past, and I've also given a lot of credit to Miguel and Carla Alexander, who are, Carla is the grandchild of the former owner of the project, and I wanted to today just give that little bit of information to you because it has gone into historical representation for the city of St. Louis, for Tilly's Corner. It's bringing back some history for the neighborhood, and that particular corner where a woman owned a small convenience store for almost 40 years. I think you remember about a year and a half ago, we had a bad storm and the building was blown down and demolished. But since that time, Carla, I have to give her credit, and Miguel, they were very creative, and I have to give credit to E.M. Harris and others who came in, worked with them, and came up with a new idea for the corner. It has received city landmark designation, and it was in the process of getting National Historic designation, but we had to move on after the building was destroyed. Now at that site, there's a playground for toddlers and disabled children. There's a butterfly home with an office and a meeting place where Carla and Miguel live. The historic grocery store site is going to have a memorial done in the future, and there's also currently a community garden there. The new construction for the residential owner-occupied home is $44,350. There was a lot of thought process put into the ability to build this at a very low cost with 1,000 square feet, a one-bedroom unit with an office to facilitate the need of the community and have community meetings there as well. The taxing district information is available to you, and I can pass that out if you're interested in how much would be assumed through the 10-year process, and we're asking for a 10-year tax abatement.
Any questions of Alderwoman Davis? Alderman French? Alderman Ornowitz?
No question.
I'll entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 183 with the due pass recommendation.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Request for previous roll. No objection. We'll consider that as heard, read, and passed out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I'm going to be lazy here and continue to stay here for a little bit. Our next board bill, we have three by me, and the first one is I'm going to ask our counselor, Tom Ray, who represents the comptroller's office, to come up and explain this because he actually called me up and asked me to introduce it. And 173.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As you may recall, at the end of the year, the calendar year, we go through a process where Dale has to make a report on the TIFs to the state of Missouri. In that process, we also terminate the special allocation fund of TIFs that have been paid off or otherwise disposed of. In this particular case, one was paid off this year, Automobile Row. It was a $1.8 million note, and the special allocation fund that was set up remains until it's terminated by ordinance, and then those funds are paid over to the taxing jurisdictions, and that is the nature of this bill.
Okay.
The reason it's a committee sub is because
we need to we have to probably bring the committee sub before us, and we should probably pass that out.
the reason it's a committee sub.
Okay. So if I could have a motion that we bring the committee sub before us.
Yeah, so moved. I move that we move committee substitute 1, Bill 173.
Before us, so we're not adopting it, we're bringing it up for purpose of discussion. So it's been moved and seconded.
Previous.
There's previous roll, no objection. So now we have the proper bill before us. Do you want to go ahead and explain what this does? And
the reason it's a committee sub is because the original bill had 2 special allocation fund termination in it. There was an error by the comptroller's office. One of the notes was retired, but it turned into a pay-as-you-go TIF afterwards for the Center of Emerging Technology. So we can't dissolve that fund at this point in time yet. The city still owns money to those that note holder. So there's only one automobile row.
Okay. Are there any questions of Tom, because he's going to be better able to answer these than I would? Alderwoman Davis.
No questions.
Alderman French.
No questions.
Alderman Ornowitz. And I have no questions. So can I have a motion that we pass out committee substitute for Board Bill 173?
Second. Previous.
Hearing no objections, we'll consider that one as heard. And Tom, I think this next one's yours too, isn't it, 179?
Actually, it's maybe a little bit Tom, but more mine, probably.
Okay.
Thank you.
And it's all part of the process that Tom just mentioned. As we go towards the end of the year, the TIF has to have sort of an annual report, and part of that is sending reports to the state for each project, which we did. They're due November 15th. But the piece that comes to the Board of Aldermen is the piece that is attached to 179. Each year we have to take all the TIF projects that have been around for either 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years and report on where they stand. And we have placed a notice in the Daily Record for the last 4 weeks saying that we'd be doing this today, as is required by the TIF statute. So if you look at the attachment to Board Bill 179, you'll see a list. At the top is, we had no TIF projects that were celebrating their 20th year or their 25th year, but we have one for 15, and that's actually the Center for Emerging Technology, which we just talked about. So that's 15 years the project's completed, and of course the TIF continues to operate. And you might remember that's the dorsal wing or the western wing of the Center for Emerging Technologies that's on Forest Park Boulevard. You can see the vast majority of these have little X's in substantially completed, so I won't particularly go through all of those, but you can also see that the one we just talked about, the automobile row RPA, has a little X over in either dissolved or being dissolved, and so that X is there indicating the action that you just took. The one below that, RPA2, was dissolved back in 2009, so that's been a while. The next one that isn't in the substantially complete column is the Bottle District, and that's in the inactive column. You know that that's sort of been combined with the North Side Regeneration Project, and though there isn't any activity going on there right now, of course the whole North Side Regeneration Project is very active in attracting activity. So that one hopefully will see some activity in the not too distant future. The next one that is not substantially completed is the Switzer Building. Remember that was in Laclede's Landing. It collapsed in a storm on Eads Bridge. So that was dissolved in 09. And the next one is the I-70 and Goodfellow project, and we had hoped to put retail there. It simply hasn't happened yet. We still have that hope. As you may know, LCRA owns that property, and we continue to work with potential developers to come up with a project there. But because the project that was initially envisioned back in 2005 never materialized, we dissolved that one back in 2011. The next one on the list that is not substantially complete is the chemical building downtown. As you may know, 721 Olive has had 2 or 3 developers acquiring it and trying to do the project. It was first approved back in 2008. Each time, in fact, Bill Keeling represents that developer. We talk with the new developer, and they have hopes that maybe they can use the TIF to put a project together. Thus far, it hasn't happened. And with the arcade building, catty-corner from it, under construction, hopefully it gives even more impetus to get the chemical building developed. But nothing has happened so far. The next couple of projects a little bit further down that have been dissolved are the Sky Wheel, which you remember didn't ever happen down on the riverfront, and 3150 South Grand, which was a project to tear down and build a mixed-use building on South Grand, but that one has a happy ending because that building remains there, and it was recently completely renovated by David Bailey and opened as the second Rooster Restaurant. And if you haven't been there, go. It's just outstanding. Not just the food, but the space is just wonderful. We were there a week or so ago. The next one on the list that is not substantially completed is the Taylor Carey project, which is partially completed, and that's the Loves project, which is completed, but there's a parcel next to it which is yet to be completed, so that's the reason it's in the partially completed column. The next one that was dissolved last year in 2013 is 500 North Kings Highway. You might remember that Pete Rothschild had hoped to convert this church into some kind of an entertainment venue. He was never able to put that together, so we dissolved it in 2013. And I guess the last one on the list that's not substantially complete is the Railway Exchange Building. And that certainly is a project that the finale on that has yet to be written. A piece of it got done when we renovated the first couple of floors for the department store, but then obviously it's left, Macy's has left, so that leaves us a 1 million square foot building that we're still seeking a reuse of in part or in whole. So that is the report. Be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
I find this nice and everything, but it does. I think the real story is whether or not the bonds are, from the city standpoint, whether or not the bonds are being amortized, and that is not contained in this report.
No, that's
in a separate report.
Yeah,
but,
right.
Something that we should be concerned about, but probably not today's the proper forum for that. Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions?
No questions.
And by what exactly are we doing? I'm sorry, Dale. We got this, and we're just accepting this report. Is that right?
Yeah, this is just a requirement of the TIF state statute that annually we have a public meeting, which this is, to review all the TIF projects that are celebrating a 5-year anniversary. And each year for, I don't know how many years we've done this, you have a board bill before you that does that.
And we need an ordinance, or it would seem like we could just have a hearing or a resolution or something, but and explain to me how is that different than the one that Tom just did for us then?
Well, Tom was dissolving one of the TIF projects.
Which meant that it was paid off and completed?
Exactly, right,
so
right.
The notes have been
Last year we had 4 or 5 of those. 1 or 2 were dissolved, but then sometimes we bring ones to you, like some of them that I just mentioned, that clearly aren't doing anything and have no chance of doing anything.
So we have to pass an ordinance to formally dissolve them, whether they're paid off or whether or not they're...
Exactly, right. And if they aren't performing at all, never did anything, there's sometimes a little residue in the special allocation fund, so when we dissolve it, again, as Tom mentioned, that just goes back to the various taxing districts.
Alderman French, Alderman Arnowitz. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that will pass out that board bill, which was
179.
179.
Second.
Good, thank you.
Hearing no objection, we'll consider that as heard and read. And then the last board bill is also mine, and that's 194. And I'm going to let Jim Mello explain this. This is basically free money for the city or for the Cortex district. It's going to create an opportunity for us to make that a super TIF, which means that we pick up some of the eats from the state. as opposed to just using local taxes to fund the district. So Jim will walk us through what's going on with this. It's my understanding that the comptroller had some concerns about this, but they have resolved it, as I have been told, so we'll hopefully get this out today as well. So go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. My name is Jim Mello. I'm an attorney at Armstrong TC. I represent Cortex on public finance issues. I think this is the first time I've appeared before the committee without asking for money. So I appreciate that. But really, the Cortex project, as you are aware, you know, we've been here. We've gotten a major TIF approved, and then we've been activating the redevelopment project areas with some projects that are highly visible, like the IKEA project and Ad 4240. So we definitely have got momentum, and it's due in large part to the cooperation of the city and the Cortex, and the state has been very cooperative. And what we've been working with the state over the last several months has been to secure a state supplemental TIF, which is, as Alderman Rede indicated, the state takes a portion of their sales tax money generated by RPA 7, which is the IKEA project, and puts it back into the project with specific allocation. It doesn't just go into a pot, but the state directs where that money can go. And the two projects that they're agreeing to fund is the building at 4260, which would be for a tech shop. And you might have heard about that. That's been discussed in the media, and we're trying to secure them. We've got a letter of intent, and we want to be able to move forward. That's kind of why we're in a little bit of a rush to try to get everything wrapped up by the end of the year, because we need to get them in the building in August of 16. So that's one project. The other project is, you might recall, the custom steel building, which is the blue corrugated steel right next to the tracks. We're buying that property in cooperation with Wexford and creating additional parking for the 4260. They're totally filled up. They're starting to convert other parking spaces that were there on their site to building and usage. They've got leases for that. So the state was cooperative in helping us secure that lot, which is not only just for surface parking now, but eventually it'll be probably 2 or 3 office buildings that will be there. So we're setting the next stage for Cortex, and we're doing it with the help of the state that's providing the funding. And so really what the board bill does is it designates St. Louis Innovation District as the developer for those 2 projects. There is no local TIF money involved. We're not using any TIF funds for these 2 projects, which has the benefit of generating additional revenue to pay off the TIF notes that we already have outstanding. So we're kind of helping the debt service and everything with the project, but there is no direct involvement of monies from the city. We're authorizing a 3rd amendment to the redevelopment agreement, which just simply integrates the state supplemental TIF into the fabric, but all conditions of the redevelopment agreement have remained unchanged. So what am I trying to say? Our inclusion policy, our inclusion goals, everything remains the same. It applies to this project, even though there's no local TIF money. So we're complying with all the reporting requirements, everything that was agreed to with the city. We're continuing that, but for this project. So it's really a very simple change. And the other thing we have to do is we have to create a separate account for the state money, because the state money cannot be commingled with city funds. So it's going to go into its own special fund from which the monies get transferred out. So we have to do that by state law. And finally, the the agreement modifies the trust indenture for the TIF notes to make it clear that these monies are not part of the local TIF notes that have been issued. So it's a pretty mechanical type thing, but it's very straightforward, but it allows us to move forward with the $14 million to do those two projects. The city's done one other super TIF, and that was in connection with the Convention Hotel 13 years ago, something like that. And so they don't do very many super TIF, state supplemental TIFs, or some people call them super TIFs. I think St. Louis County has done one for North Park, and there's been a few others, but it's less than a dozen in the state. And that created a little confusion on our part with the comptroller's office, because these monies are not appropriated by the Board of Aldermen. They pass through, and so in my initial discussions with the comptroller's office, I was focused on that. But the comptroller wants to have the ability to assess how this impacts the overall big picture of the public financing component. And so we were able to work out an arrangement there that would allow us to go forward on this important project now, which is time critical, and still keep the dialogue and keep working, because you will see me back here again asking for activation of an RPA, and we'll work out those issues like we have worked out issues over the last couple of years. And Rob Droney from the comptroller's office is here to speak a little bit, and so is Mike Sullivan from Cortex if there's any other questions. Thanks.
Rob, did you want to make a statement on behalf of the comptroller then? Or?
Yes, Alderman Rede. As everyone is aware, the comptroller is the chief financial officer of the city, and has continued to scrutinize the allocations of funds and the revenue sources in this TIF throughout. And in fact, one of the issues that the comptroller had with some of the funding was the Metrolink station, and that was a particular policy issue for the comptroller. And as a result of the comptroller's scrutiny and working with the developer and the action on the developer, they were able to obtain a $10.3 million grant. So the comptroller commends a Tiger grant for that project. Comptroller commends the developer for their being proactive in finding other sources of revenue. But as part of that factor, when you have an infusion of additional outside revenue, it requires the comptroller to reevaluate the allocation of funds as to the overall project. And the comptroller, will continue to do that, and will continue to do that in consideration of the state super TIF funds that are being infused into the project, and continue to work with the developer to make sure that those funds are properly allocated according to the best interests of the city. So the comptroller will continue to work with the developer and and provide feedback to the Board of Aldermen, to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions of any of the speakers, or Alderwoman Davis?
I don't know if well, first I want to comment on the comptroller's steadfast position that I appreciate. It's critical that we do have the best oversight possible for all these projects. And I remember when we did the first super TIF, and I do know that the actual process itself has changed as far as how we interact with where the funds go and the decision making from the very first one that was done.
Right.
So I could understand how there was a little bit of confusion as well.
Yeah, and Jim Mello mentioned the North Park project. I've represented that project on behalf of the county since its inception, so I'm very familiar with the way the super TIF works.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. But secondly, I wanted to say on behalf of the Cortex project, I have to keep apologizing because I was sitting on the TIF commission when it came before us, and I was very much against it. And I was against it for good reasons, because it was too vague. I didn't feel as though there was enough information about how it was going to move forward in the future. But I can sit here and say I'm very happy about what is taking place now, and the infusion of jobs, technology, knowledge, and everything else for the city is good. So if we continue on the path that we're on, we're going to be a city to be reckoned with that particular project. And I just wanted to thank you all.
Alderman Ornowitz? I'm sorry, Alderman French, we went out of order there. Alderman French, any questions? No questions. Okay, then at that point, we'll entertain a motion that we pass this board bill out, board bill number 194.
Second.
Hearing no objections, we'll consider that as heard, read, and passed out. And I think we're done for the day. Thank you all for your time today.